carrying huge pace. Look how fast he's going. Polar opposite to the conditions he won in Lourdes. Rain-soaked Lourdes. Never getting the last step down. The crowd is roaring. He is going to do it. He's going to smash the time of Lourdes.
Downhill racer and our expert here today, Andrew Neethling.
Podcast fans, welcome back. This is Moving the Needle podcast. I hope you know who I am. I'm Andrew Neethling. You've been annoyed by me for a couple episodes now, and I'm excited. It's race season. Welcome to the Crankbrothers Race Review. That'll be with me. Crankbrothers is synonymous with DH Racing Circuit. Last year, I can't believe it, but they've celebrated 11 years in a row of Elite World Champs wins with that Mallet DH pedal. That's a pedal I used to race. And they didn't stop there. They've been adding to their product offering the last few years, and now they've got a whole host of podium contenders in their shoes. Riders like Bernard Kerr, Lucas Shaw, Laurie Greenland. Sven Martin will be with me. He has been an integral part of Crankbrothers' social media coverage over the last few years. And Alan Milway, who actually is a Crankbrothers ambassador, and he trains the likes of Greg Menard also on those pedals. And hey, he's our reigning world champion, which we'll chat about in the show. Guys, it's race season. It is almost here. Sven, how are we doing?
Just to, since this is a factual podcast, Crankbrothers might have won 11 years in a row on the clip pedals, but it's 12 years if you add Sam Hill's winning on flat pedals prior to that. And that was for male, and they had pretty much almost the same through the women's podiums as well.
I remember we chatted about that last year. Sven has to control everything, and he has done a mighty job of the intro. But no, that is pretty good info. We do need that because the likes of Sam Hill is, one of the most, iconic names in downhill, and we're going to get to pre-season and talking about things. And there's not a lot of people on flat pedals anymore, but the other member of the team will be Alan Milway, who put me through my paces. I trained with Alan as well. Alan, how are we doing, and where are you calling in from?
Hey, Andrew. Hey, Sven. I'm calling from, believe it or not, a sunny and warm UK, which is quite a nice change. All good here. Yeah, exactly. It's nice, beautiful day here, just outside Birmingham. And it's nice to speak to you both.
Yeah, I guess we're going to get to that in depth. Andrew's probably got lots of questions for you. But at this time of the year, 2 weeks before Lourdes, there's not much you can be having your athletes do, or is there some last-second cramming?
No, fortunately, there's no last-second cramming needed. Everyone's been pretty hard at work. This week is, I think, for different people, slightly different things. I know Greg's doing some testing. He's got some testing starting today with Fox. Joe Breeden's on a new prototype intense that came through just last week, so he's getting some runs on that. And some of the other guys and girls are just getting sharp, really. So it's quite an exciting time. I'm really looking forward to it. Most people are traveling either over the weekend or on Monday to head out to Lourdes. So just can't wait to get going now.
And I'm assuming Joe Breeden would be on that same intense that Dakota Norton just won on in Windrock last Saturday.
Yeah, that's it. There's been a few different versions, and I think Joe's now on the version that Dakota's on. So it sounds really good. He's excited.
Yeah, and if you think about a rider switching teams, because there was a lot of that, and maybe that's where we'll start jumping into, because Sven's opened up that can of worms. For a rider that switched teams, I almost, as hopefully they get on with the bike, but what I normally see with that is a lot more testing, a lot more riding, because they're forced to do that. So normally maybe this early season race, if they got the bike early enough, they've got like a good amount of bike time. You've seen like Laurie Greenland, like he's obviously excited to ride the new bike. So he's putting a lot of downhill laps in. And I think that relates to a lot more comfortability and touch and feel on the bike versus, say, some of the older guys, which is, we should also get into, like a Greg Menard. It's quite stale for him to ride the same bike, test the same stuff. And he's, 40 years old. So it's a little bit more boring for him. So when guys switch teams, I look at that. If they get on with the bike, great, because they've done a lot of bike time. Lucas Shaw being one as well. he'll be wanting to have ridden the bike a lot more than normal in an off season.
Yeah, but I also think it depends. I think it depends on the rider itself. Yeah, for sure, it's nice to get on something that's not stale, so to speak. But then there's also riders that can ride anything. Like there's suspension technicians that have said in the past, you could pour sand in Danny Hart and Josh Bryson's suspension, and like they would just get on with it and not complain and not be phased, and it wouldn't affect them. And I think maybe Dakota is even one of those guys that would adapt to a new bike quicker than, say, Gwyn. So I'm actually not surprised that he's just, he's literally been on that bike a couple of days or a couple of weeks just before that race. And yeah, pretty impressive that he took on so quick.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sven. I think that it does depend on the rider because Greg, how precise Greg is with setting up a bike. I think it's quite a stressful scenario to go, right, it's a completely fresh, completely blank canvas, fresh bike, everything's new, you've got to get used to everything. But for another rider, it might be quite exciting to go, right, let's get some laps in. The biggest thing that I've seen them over the years is that off-season testing, you can do as much of it as you like, but it just isn't racing. And even though the suspension gets set up really well pre-season, it always seems to be the case that it's too soft. After day one of practice, the suspension's too soft because they're just not riding at that speed and at that intensity. So it's something that I think if you're on a new bike, this first race might still, for some riders be quite a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on that. I think my stance was it forces them to get a lot more bike time than maybe some of them would have put. Say, if you're training a rider and a few days a week was downhill bike time, if you get a new bike, I think the rider would be pushing you, say, I need to get some
Yeah,
bike time,
definitely.
or let's add to that. But yes, the double-edged sword and the negative is you've got to get that bike set up and you don't know what it does under race conditions. So that's why some of these pre-race races that the guys did is key, and you can read into those results, but at the same time I don't think you can read too much because it depends on what the guy's goal was at these races. We know some of the French guys know one speed, but maybe a Reese Wilson, he seems to have a little bit of like a more experienced head on his shoulders, I think. So he might know, okay, I'm going to push, I'm going to gauge myself, but if I'm 2-3 seconds back on a 3-minute track, I'm not too worried. I'm just gauging what the guy's race pace is. So yeah, that's definitely interesting, and there are lots of team changes. And I think, I mean, the topic of this podcast is how early this season is, and we've spoken about some of those challenges. What other challenge do you think we can look at, Alan? I mean, some of these older statesmen, I think it might be tough for them to elevate their game so early after a shorter off season, as well as knowing they need to peak later in the year. World Champs is coming. It's going to be an even longer season than they used to.
Yeah, I think also the venue that they've chosen being like Lourdes, the sun doesn't come up over that mountain when the juniors and the women are up at the top of the hill. They've been up there for 30 minutes and it's so greasy and slick. It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence early on in the day. And it's got some really technical, steep sections into it. So I think it could be a baptism of fire, that track, quite early on. And then we've got a really big gap and such a different style of track, going back to Fort William. So yeah, I don't know whether it's almost not a standalone, but like when we used to go to South Africa, Pietermaritzburg, really early and then come back and have a big gap before, the second round of the season. It will be quite interesting. There could be some people who are right on the pace and maybe some people who are still warming up into things and haven't quite got themselves where they need to be, and maybe still started a little later. Yeah, started their training a little bit later and still need a bit of time to get into it.
Yeah, I'm all for racing longer throughout the year, but in going together with that, I'm more for more races. If you still just have the same 7-8 race season, it's just an odd one for me. Being a Kiwi or a South African or an Aussie or someone from South America to come out and then literally 2 months later come back again, it doesn't make sense. So, I'm not going to say we shouldn't have Lord on the calendar, because after missing so many races the last 2 years with COVID, you don't want that. But it seems an odd one to have such a early race at altitude where we've had snow before, and it's a month earlier than the event we had snow at, and we've had clay and wet. If you're going to have a race in March, it should be in the Southern Hemisphere, and we should have two. So if someone's going to travel all the way to wherever that race is in March or April, you should have, two races in the 3 weeks, or two races back to back, one in Aussie, one in New Zealand, one in South Africa, or one in Australia. You know what I mean? Like, it's that's my 2 cents. But that's really not what we're here to talk about. We're not going to change the sport. We aren't the UCI. But
we can try, Sven.
You can try.
That was quite a.
We're going to try predict the sport.
Constructive moan.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't always give constructive criticism.
I just backed it up. All my moans, all my moans and arguments have a lot of constructive behind them.
Fair enough. But they sometimes come across.
It's
hidden in there
harsh.
somewhere. Sometimes, Sven, it's hidden in there.
I thought that was quite politically correctly put, and I agree. It's more. I was speaking to Troy Brosnan. That podcast will come out after this one, but he had some great info on his picks, because he could sort of unbiasedly chat about who he thought would do well. And he also was just upfront. He said, why are we going racing in Europe in March? Like, he's all for racing. He's stoked that UCI wants to put on more races, but I mean, it's a no-brainer in a perfect world to go racing in the Southern Hemisphere, be it Australia, be it New Zealand, be it South Africa, be it Brazil, be it somewhere with a more moderate climate. So we could do this podcast, and I just spend quite a lot of time writing an article that'll get released in a day or two, which helped me prep. I mean, it could all be in vain. We could literally be laughing at each other with the snow or the rain coming down with the last 40 riders at the top of the hill, like the last time we were at Lourdes in 2017. So that is unfortunately one option for the race being in March. It could just be a crapshoot.
That's why this show is not called Off Track Betting. We're not giving any betting advice.
Would you not bet against? Would you not bet against an Antipodean then? Would you say that you would go French, you would go European for wet, cold, muddy track?
In Lourdes, if the conditions are wet in Lourdes, you roll the dice, or you the guy that went down before the rain, like our last winner there. Nothing to take away from his win, but we had the launch of the 29-inch Santa Cruz bikes, and like in qualifying, all three of them were top 5, I think. They had like a free 2 seconds with the new bigger wheels that, we'll never know really, because it rained, and the racing is the final result is what counts. But if we have those slick conditions, because it's not about the snow and the temperatures, it's about that clay based and that limestone, I believe it is. And if you're ridden on clay and limestone, it's just not great for bikes.
It's like soap. Yeah, it's like riding on soap when it's wet, isn't it?
But then in Lourdes' defense, whether it's winter, summer, you could have you could have rain in the summer too. So, but it is March, and we'd all rather be in the Southern Hemisphere right now.
Very well. Yeah, I understand. I think that's it. And it will be guys that can adapt, because I think this is the other interesting thing, is the cream does always rise to the top, and those guys and girls will know this, won't they? We won't be telling them anything they don't know. They'll be prepared. They'll be doing what they need to do. And, the top 3-4 girls that I think are going to be pretty close this year, and how many top 10 that could be shuffled all over the place this coming season. I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, in the last 2 weekend show, they are being prepared. They were a little bit further south in Portugal, a little bit drier, but still quite cold. That's where we should have had the season opener, like they did. Basically, it was essentially the season opener 2 weekends ago, and then just yesterday, the racing further north in latitude than Lourdes, but a lot lower in elevation in Brioude. I had a home base not even 50 k's from there, so middle of a farming area in central France. But we will probably get into talking about some of those results as an indicator of early season form, because there was quite a percentage of the world's best there.
Well, before we hop into sort of the pre-races, if you were not having any pre-races and we went off last year, I actually started doing some digging and some analysis and wrote this article. And what the sad thing is, one of the most consistent starters to the season, as well as has a win at the first race, and I'm sure you guys can all guess this guy who's got the most top fives, most top tens, and even a win in the last 6 years, because I had to throw away 2017 Lourdes. So instead of 5 years, I went 6 years back.
Yes.
Who would you guess?
Well, we've already spoken about him.
Who?
Well, obviously Troy.
There you go. So unfortunately, Troy won't be there. But if you contrast that to Manar, I think he has one top five in the last 6 years. So Troy, yes, he has one win, two top fives, and two top tens in the 5 races I tracked. And, I threw away 2017 compared to Greg.
Greg's
who's known as the one most consistent.
He's a diesel. He's not going to start.
No,
fast.
I know. He's not a fast starter, and I would say it for years. But I couldn't believe the lack of results at the first race. And it started making me think, if he could just get the first race better, he could be in for a title. Because, they say you don't sort of
exactly.
win the championship,
You can't win a
the first
championship,
race, but you could lose it.
Yeah, on your on your worst days. And then we could talk about first races, and someone like, we're jumping the gun, I'm sure, Andrew.
Go for it.
But someone like Loic is interesting, both of his history. Did a lot of pre-race season preparation at Lourdes in Croatia, and jumped into that first round also quite early, quite cold, also same kind of rock. But because he was so confident from doing pre-season testing on that track, which is another contentious subject that I'm not too happy about, but he jumped into all that confidence and jumped at full gas and then got injured and had that elbow injury. This year he's smartly, he's wiser, he's older, and of course he's like one of the most experienced. Even when he was a younger racer, he had one of the best race heads, as proof is all those rainbow jerseys. But if you look at the last race in Portugal, he took a slightly different approach to everyone else. And I've had a couple of direct feedback from a couple of people that were there and noticing how people were all in, and some looked like they were literally doing like a World Cup race run. And someone like Loic, I think, is a lot smarter now, and his result at that round, I don't think you should be concerned that it'll be indicative of his first race in Lourdes, and it being a French race. And we know how Loic loves the fans, but he's taking the safe approach. We saw Almery go out last year before the season even started, because he took the Almery approach, which it looks like he's still doing. If you look at his Instagram and if you look at his race result, he's going clappers and he's not scared. He's just, it's almost like that injury last season didn't happen, and he's literally doing the same thing. I direct messaged him. I'm like, bro, there's no need to go that fast, especially for Instagram or Instagram stories. Like, you should just chill. He's like, bro, that wasn't fast. I'm like, all right, yeah, okay. And this weekend, home race, maybe it was a silver lining that he was a bit ill and didn't take the start, because you never know, he might have like tried to win in his hometown, and that could have been detrimental. Who knows? We'll never know. But anyway, just things to consider. Frenchies in France.
Well, I think what you touched on something really interesting there, Sven, and to me it's how the riders are perceiving each of these events. So the way I will often discuss it with my riders is, when they're riding, we sort of traffic light system. It's either green, you're out there riding, you're playing, you're trying to learn. There's not really any structure, and there's no consequence at all to the outcome. Okay, so that's like your green ride. And then an amber is when there's much more structure to it. You might be testing, timing, comparing the bike setup, being really quite structured. But there isn't, again, a consequence to it. You might have some times listed, but there's no public consequence. And then you've got this red riding, which is, again, against the clock, but there is a consequence. There's an outcome to it. And that, to me, is really interesting, because I think some riders need more of those red rides, because all they do is play and have fun and ride so quickly. But when you turn up at a World Cup, that is red, isn't it? There's no green there. Whatever you want to tell yourself or tell the media, there's an outcome to it. It's going to be public. But these riders, they can go so fast when it's sort of green and it's fun and they're learning. But maybe the less experienced ones need a bit more of that. Let's have some of these races. And that's what I've really liked, seeing some of the guys, Laurie on that new bike. And I know Charlie's been doing stuff with him where they've been racing each other to try and get a bit more of that. Look, there's an outcome to this. We're going to be judged on it. Let's up the pace in these certain situations.
Sounds like you're been consulting for the New Zealand government with their COVID health response with your amber system there.
It's 2022.
We
traffic light system. Yeah, I know. No, I think that unfortunately traffic light systems are quite a nice, easy way to scale things. And pre-pandemic, it probably would have slipped past you there,
But you know what it makes me think of is sort of confidence momentum. And I think each rider with their team can almost use each race to help themselves. So Loic might go in, hey, I'm experienced, and he'll sort of take the pressure off. And we saw it with his results. And I saw his Instagram, like this face he had when you get smoked by everyone at the pre-race. And he might be able to convince himself, hey, it was a pre-race. I didn't put my best foot forward on purpose, sort of hopefully help some of his confidence. But those other riders that win those pre-races, then they're going to use it as confidence. It's like such a sort of contradiction, I think, is because if a rider wins one, you say, well done, you're riding well. If you don't win one, you say, oh, it's just a preseason race.
Exactly.
I was only going there to test. It's such an interesting one. So you've got to have a defined goal sort of before you get there. And I know, like with Greg, he is a slow starter, but I would never bet against him at the first World Cup as much as I would bet against someone else that got 15th at the first pre-race, because I've been there with him. And he had Rob Roskop saying, hey, do you want me to book you like a psychologist? Like, what's going on? Like, you're off the pace. He's like, just give me one or two more races. If it's still a problem,
but
I'll think about it. And then the first race he's in the top 5 or something. So
but
I think the more experienced rider is able to lift his game, even if he factually struggles at a preseason race, like a Loic.
Should Greg, for that very reason, if you say he's been a slow starter, should he not have been at one of those preseason races? I mean, they were in Portugal, so they were obviously testing and going against the clock. So maybe they did enough of that there. But should he not have stayed one more week and done the Toluca race?
I mean, you could say
well, none of us can tell Greg what to do.
Well,
maybe Alan can.
It's just on paper he hasn't done as well in the beginning of the season, and past years before, he's been around for a long time. But the thing with Greg is, and each rider, as Alan will say, you've got to understand what makes you tick. You've got to understand that Greg knows World Cup pace so well. And whether you take him to a preseason race or not, I just think he's been in the game so long. To keep the longevity, if you go preseason race and get ready for the first one that hard, he might not be there at the end of the season, and he might not be there for another year or two racing. So it's a catch-22 with him. But if you say, is Gwyn, should he be going over there? Should he be sacrificing? Well, he learned when he was on Specialized, shucks.
Yeah.
He didn't have the bike set up, but I do see him over on the East Coast, which can.
Well, he bought a house there, so he put himself where the tracks are.
Exactly.
And I will actually correct myself. I'll take that back, Greg. If you ever listen to this, do you think Greg ever listened to this? I'm going to say no, but he did a preseason race. It was national champs in South Africa, and he was
he got punctured
on a winning time, and he punctured in the rock on his track that he won World Cups and World Championships on. So he has put himself through that race weekend prep and, got to the final and everything.
Yeah, and I think it's changing for him. I think the younger teammates, he spoke about how fun that's been for him. I think they're going to push him. I think they're going to keep him young. And he is aware that it isn't the old days like 10 years ago where you could come out of the off-season fit. And then the first race, sometimes you'd go to CR in April. Then you'd go over to Europe in May and you'd do a preseason or a test. And then everyone raced, say Fort William in June. Now the season's earlier, and half the riders like Loic testing in New Zealand, like everyone's up the off-season downhill bike time, and he knows that. So unfortunately, he's just trying to play catch up and
Yep.
aware of it. And I think he will be decent there. Will he be on race winning pace? I mean, I'd like to say yes, but it's going to be a tall order.
Yeah, well, then again, not to take anything away from Greg, but he made a big change last year, and he's attributed a lot of the change to his new balance and balance in getting his muscles balanced in his body, and new form of strength training, which is literally, I mean, Alan, you got to be pretty happy that the first year you worked with Greg and you came away with a rainbow jersey?
Second,
Yeah.
I'll take that, but I think it's his. To be honest, it really is. What I'm so amazed by is his openness to accept a change at that age. Because for me to come in, I had a camp with the syndicate. It would have been 19. Yeah, so it'd have been 19. I had a camp with the syndicate in the winter, and uh, it was what I found really interesting was the fact that he was open to this, me coming in and saying, look, I've seen this. I think we should try something different. I think you should try something new. And for a lot of people at that age with that much experience and success, it would be very easy to go, you know what, I'm quite happy with where I'm at. And I had to build that trust with him and understand him. And that's why we did quite a lot of testing, physical testing, so I could see where he's at. And he's got some incredible strengths, physiological strengths. His like aerobic conditioning is phenomenal, but there were some clear gaps. And I think my job and my challenge was to show him that as an opportunity and say, look, you can capitalize on this and we can improve it. And he's been open to it, and he's been happy to follow through with it, because it would be very easy for him to look at it as impacting on other areas or taking up more time or making him more tired. And we've really tried to get that balance right. And yeah, you see it on the bike, don't you? You see that position on the bike, and he's able to maintain that position on the bike and fight back as it was. So yeah, it's been a good process.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I heard that he was working with you and in the gym, and I actually did a project with him, and I got dragged back in the gym, and yeah, a few things stood out. I mean, you don't become the greatest of all time without putting the work in, but he's always trying to evolve. And as much as
Yes.
people say he goes home and he has a bit of fun, I think that is the way that he stays in the sport so long. Play a bit of golf, have a few too many beers when the time is right. And he's really good at that balance, and they say in life. But he clearly didn't have the full workout balance. So when he added the gym structure, I was like, this could make a good difference now later in his career with the youngsters coming in and Gwyn changing the game. So that was great to see. And like I said, I do see that he can be quick at the first race. I just think the challenge for him is the youngsters are riding so much, and for him, he's been doing it so long, to get him motivated, to get him to spark, he needs a World Cup, like a preseason race to Greg. It's tough for him to elevate
Yeah.
his game. And someone like Loic as well, when they're putting all that into winning a World Cup series overall at the end of last year, that takes a lot of energy out of them, and they need to reset. They need to get away to build up that motivation, because every year coming back after an off season, I think it's harder and harder. And someone like, maybe we can jump to the Frenchies. You've got Amaury showing he knows one speed, and that's 100%. Another guy that knows one speed that me and Troy were speaking about is Thibaut Deprella. Yes, he got injured last year. That's a knock to his confidence.
And I think
But
he had a
is he?
flat at the race
Yeah,
in Portugal,
but
right?
his qualifying didn't look too good. But I don't know the full story. But is he young enough that it's almost ignorance is bliss? It doesn't matter that he was injured. Like, to him, he knows one speed, and the hunger's there at that age. So like an Amaury and a Thibaut are going to come out firing at the first race, even though it's early.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a contradiction about what I'm going to say, because he is young, but he's bred like a Nico. He's been mentored by Nico. I'm talking about Vuillot here. So as young as he is, coming from the juniors, and kind of a rookie elite, he has the race head of someone 10 years older. Yet at the same, so he has the Loic factor, but then he also to his detriment at the end of last year, I asked him, I didn't go to West Virginia. I said to him, so what are you going to do? You pretty much just need to get 2 top 20s. And he's like, no, I'm going to go for the win, not go for the podium or try fast. He said, no, I want to go for the win. And, sadly, that for both him and Pom Pom, it just didn't end. The season just didn't end that way. But sometimes that's what makes these champions and winners. Like, even though he would have just had to wrap up the season, if he didn't have the personality type to always go for it, he wouldn't have put himself in that position to win the season. So, he's got to stay true to himself. But I'm sure would have got a couple of cracks from the team manager because he literally just had to finish the 2 races. But that's why we love the sport. That's why we're here talking about the sport, and it hasn't even started because of there's no recipe to success. And you've talked about those 2 Frenchies, and we've talked about Loic and Amaury and De Prela, all for sure podium threats season long. They could all win the series. But now there's another Frenchie that's slowly but surely crept up, had top 10s, got the odd podium. And now if you look at World Champs and last year, he's now literally become a consistent podium threat, and he can win a race. He's at second at World Champs. And Coulange, who's just slowly but surely worked on his riding and come off different bikes. He used to have that gearbox bike with a belt drive, and now he's on the bike that's winning a lot of races. There's only a handful of bikes that are getting on the podiums these days, and he's been on it for a while. And him and Almary's brother were on the podium this weekend, and he was on the podium the weekend before in France. So actually, from this the takeaway from this 2 weeks racing that a lot of people have been at, he would be leading the series right now if it was Amaury didn't race, so we don't know, but Benoit, he's going to be last year I think he was our sort of wild card pick. I'm going to say he's going to be one of the regulars this year.
So what
do you think? Yeah, what do you think has brought that sort of steady improvement? Because I've certainly felt he's been. Would you agree more of a slow burner in terms of he's sort of gradually got better and better and better, and now he's cemented himself as really one of the challengers?
Well, you know what it is. When I was in business school a long, long time ago, one of the things is Budget were number 2 in car rentals, and Avis were number 1. Maybe I'm getting this completely wrong, but it doesn't matter who was number 1 and number 2. But one of their slogan, whoever was number 2, and I believe it was Budget, there was maybe it was Avis. One of their slogans is "We try harder," right? So when you're number 2, and let's look at the Commencal pecking order, we can't call them the B team anymore, or because they're another factory team. They have Cami, Rainbow Jersey, winning World Cups, and she's won last weekend. So they're not the B team, but in terms of media attention and whoever everyone thinks, they've got Pom Pom and Amaury versus Cami and Benoit. So let's call them in our heads the number 2 team. That's got to be a quiet motivator. One, knowing you're on some of the best equipment, race-proven bike, but also you always want to, A, you want to beat your teammate, or B, you actually want to beat the other fucking team that's also, that you're sharing
on your kit.
resources with. And who wants to, these guys, Max is at every race, and they want nothing better than having Max be at the party in their pits at the end of the weekend. It's just that pat on the back, and it's got to be a motivator. And you know what? That team is just like the Commencal team. They get on like a family. They've got a lovely team manager. It just works well, and there's a good chemical balance, and the personalities work, and they all really like to be at the races on the weekend. So I think that's just, happy racer is a good racer.
I think to Alan's point or his question, and I agree with all that. And
sorry, that was a bit long-winded.
I'm
going to wrap this up.
It's not like you like talking or anything, Sven, coming from me. But on those, you brought up some great points. I think calling it the B team isn't
No,
sort
it's
of
not
fair anymore.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it is this. Let's call it the satellite team. It is not
No,
the factory team.
I'd say it's
they get factory
another
support.
factory team. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
but
a
surely it's
co-owned
B team on salary. Would you not agree with that? They're
Well,
B team on
100%.
salary.
So
yeah,
that is, there's no denying that must be a little bit of a motivating factor. I don't know exactly what motivates him, but for sure, stepping up and kicking the factory team's ass must feel very good come Sunday night when you're drinking a beer. But your question was, where has he come from? Why is he doing so good? I think that's the French factor. I think that's doing these French Cups. I think that's seeing the guys ahead of him and getting towed up to speed. Clearly, he's got the skill, he's got the talent and the work. But over time, this French domination is coming from these guys all racing together and all wanting to do as good as each other. And then he might see himself, shit, I just got fifth at a French Cup. Look who's ahead of me. Oh, I just got fourth. Okay, so I can ride the pace of these guys. I've just got to now learn to do it when the pressure's on. The other thing, speaking of pressure, if he carries on doing what he does and he does go to the factory team, that brings a whole nother set of expectations, salary demands, all those sort of stuff. That'll be interesting to see.
If Commensal can keep both teams
Well,
then at
yes,
that point,
but
yeah.
we all know some people do very well as the underdogs. Some people do very well as the B
Yeah.
rider. As soon as you're the only guy in that tent and you look around, you go, shit, if I don't get a result, that
all eyes on
mechanic
me.
might not have a job. You know, it's all on me. And that's what makes a true champion, is to block all that out and deliver. But I think wildcard is not the right term, but I don't know what we call for a guy that hasn't won a World Cup but has the very much the potential to win the first race, which has not been done for a very long time. And he would be one of those guys.
Yeah. I would say he's more of a consistent podium rider, but he will win a race. So I won't call him for the first race, but and just
But if there was a guy, could he be the guy? Say someone was a first-time winner, it could be
a first-time winner. Then he's one of the few guys that can win that hasn't won. But then it's just crazy talking about the French and what motivates them. I think maybe that battle, like some countries, you're going to make the world's team. I mean, I made the world team like 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row racing for South Africa. So like,
you're going to just a selfless plug,
huh?
Just a selfless plug.
No, I'm not. I'm saying, if you listen, hear me out. If I was French, there's not a chance in hell. If I was Kiwi, if I was Aussie, there's not. If I was American, I could have made the world's team that one year. But any of those other countries, you were not. I was not making the world's team. But
no, look at
so. You're growing up as a junior rider or up and coming rider, and your biggest goal is, I want to make the world team. I want to be the top 5 French guy. I want to be the top 6 or 7, however many allocation you get. Look at Antoine Vidal, come from Enduro, qualified second at World Champs last year. Like, where the fuck did that come from? On Val de Sol, also on a Commensal, and also French, and on a 3rd or 4th Commensal team, So, yeah. It's something in the water in France. And
well, I've got a follow up to that, because what I've seen, you used to see this in the UK a lot, and I think maybe we're seeing a little less of it, is everyone riding together as like a decent squad of UK riders. And now I think we might be getting back to that a little bit, but there has been a few years where the riders didn't want to ride with each other. I worked with 2 or 3 elite downhill guys that all in the UK who didn't really want to train and ride together. And the French that I've seen over the winter, I've seen some of Pom-Pom's like winter training camps with the rest of the crew. How good is that? You bring this group of really talented, very dedicated professional riders together with some mechanics, so you can make some meaningful changes to the bike and you can try stuff. And then you put them on the same hill at the same time. And this is not the same as going to the same bike park and riding different shuttles. And I think that's what maybe, if I may be talking out my arse here, but
no, you hit the nail on the head, I think. Because I mean, even you're seeing Cecile's training a lot of them, but she has athletes from cross country, enduro, and downhill all training in the same weekend camps, and they all gleaning something off each other.
Exactly.
And like you said, the a lot of the French riders, they're each other's biggest competitors, but they are feeding off each other and riding with each other. And in the World Surf League, the Aussies, there hasn't been a good crop of Aussies for so long, and now the Aussies are doing what the Brazilians have done for the last 5 years, and they piggybacking accommodation with each other, and they staying on the beach watching each other's heats, and then suddenly you've had 3 or 4 rookie Aussies qualify for the first time, which they haven't had that field for a while. So, Alan, I think exactly what you said. It's having those posses, and the Aussies had it when they had Sam, Rennie, Graves, Bryn, Kovarik. Those guys were a posse,
and the stepchild Andrew.
And then Andrew was the
But
adopted.
I only bring that up because
and yeah, you're right.
Training was fun, but the race was almost easy because I was trying to hang on the back of these guys that had, they were the best riders in the world at that time. You had Rennie, Sam Hill. So we're doing laps at Big Bear. I mean, I was so out of my depth in the beginning, but then I could hang on with them. So then a World Cup to me was easy. I was like, well, I can hang on with these guys at Big Bear. So then what's the difference? So you're totally right, Alan, that it elevates your game. It hurts your ego in the beginning.
Exactly. That's the problem.
If you let that get in the way of like, geez, I'm getting smoked here. It's like, no, well, fine. What can I do to improve? Okay, cool. He's dragging me up to speed. 1 week I'm better, 1 week he's better. But yeah, that French race series, as well as them going, you know what? We're competitors, but if we ride together, we're going to push each other. And then maybe we both can, get first or second or either or. So you see it in motocross a lot. It's changing. The guys all like ride at the same compounds. And for sure, one guy's better than the other guy in practice, but it's pushing everyone. It's elevating the game.
It also like, yes, they can ride and practice together, but they almost don't even have to be friends if you have a strong national or local series, because we saw how this current genre of the last 3 years where we've had the French really like, it's just a new French wave, let's call it. But just before that, and after the Aussies was the British riders. And it's like you said, and it's also indicative of a very strong and successful BDS series then. And now the last 2 years, you're not having everyone.
No, it's really fallen away. Yeah.
So, and
exactly.
with that, we have less Brits on the top. We had a whole wave of them, and it was also one of the hardest teams to qualify for world champs. And back when the Norbo was a really strong series, you had all the internationals, the Europeans, the British riders, the South Africans, the Aussies were all competing at the Norbos. So yes, yeah. I think really what the sport needs, besides what we focus on the World Cup, but we really need to have those strong feeder series. The IXS is good for the mid Europe riders, but I think each country and region really needs to have a strong domestic racing series, and I wish we could put more incentive for the top rider in each region. They should almost be like they have to do races in their region in addition to the World Cups. Like they have to do at least 2 nationals or 1 national champs. Obviously it can't work for everyone, but those things to me are important both for the future of the sport, and it actually will just benefit everyone in those regions.
And what's interesting, what you say in that last point, Sven, is I completely agree. I'd love to see it contracted in where you would do the British Race Series and the World Cup Series. But it seems as though I know quite a few riders that in their contract, they've got the World Cup Series and then select EWS events. Now, the only reason really they're going to these EWS events is for the marketing exposure, because that's not going to help them win a downhill race, really, is it? Compared to getting in amongst the cohort and testing and being at a national. And I think if the national series could be elevated back to where they have been, the UK, it's ironic really, because in the UK now with Dovey Bike Park, Revolution Bike Park, we've got Llangollen, Jesus, then we've got Scotland. We could honestly hold a World Cup event at a couple of different venues here, I would say, with some very technical, difficult tracks. We've got some fantastic tracks, but we don't have that real kind of cohesiveness that maybe we need. And I'm at bike parks a lot that are really, there's some really technical stuff, difficult stuff there. And you'll see really good riders there, but they're sort of like ships in the night, on the hill. They're not really working together at it all the time.
That's interesting about, having the EWS series, and I think it's great. I mean, look, I love enduro, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, some of these riders, if they're trying to get results in downhill, it's a piss poor attempt at getting extra marketing because, yeah, you'd be better off doing a local race or
I'm going to disagree.
doing something else with your time. I mean, you're going to go there and, some guys could do well, but I agree with that. I think that also we could open up a can of worms because sometimes I think the sponsors want it all. They want the YouTube, they want the social media, and then they want the downhill result. And I'm like, okay, cool, but let's focus on one thing. What do you want? And how do we get that? And you probably, as a coach, have to deal with, is that the best use of your time and energy leading up to a race? And that's a can of worms.
Yeah,
we
that's
can
the bit.
open, we can't
Yeah,
open.
Sven. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear because I work with EWS riders as well, and I've started working with Greg Callahan this winter, and the structure of his training is very different. He's got technical elements, and we've looked at what we think he needs to succeed in the event, and we're training him for that. And interestingly, he's going to do some pre-season UK downhill races because there's this later start in the EWS season. But I don't think you'd ever send Greg to a World Cup downhill race if you flip it on its head and go, well, let's get some more bike time at a World Cup, because he'd be like, well, I've not been focused on that. And there will be riders who will do both. And I do wonder what your thoughts are on this, Sven, because I wonder whether this sort of rider doing both was actually in the sponsor's best interest, because they'll be like, you know what, I could get two for the price of one here. I'll get one rider to do both series. I'll pay him a half decent salary, but maybe not a downhiller's salary and an EWS rider's salary. And you had this rider that was doing quite well in both, but not necessarily. I think Eddie Masters is probably the exception here. He was doing incredibly in both. But, what's your thoughts on using EWS to help downhill?
Well, I would say I'm going to disagree with Andrew, as I like to do, but I'm going to say that an EWS racer doing some downhill events will probably help that EWS racer more than a downhiller doing EWS events.
Yeah.
All right. So in that point, I agree with
I was
Andrew.
going to say,
but
that sounds like he's agreeing with me. We could just get this on record.
no, I'm saying which one is more beneficial. Which one is more beneficial? But let's say, look at Jamie Edmondson when he privateered 2 years ago for the first time. He would never have got those downhill podiums in that short COVID year if he wasn't super sharp on racing and hadn't done 3 back-to-back EWSs and then straight into a downhill. And let's not kid, like, I don't know when last you guys have been an EWS round, but it is no longer riding at 70 and 80%. It's downhill racing, and it's incredible what they are able to achieve. And the courses have been somewhat shortened, and the format's been somewhat tweaked, and there's some repeat of some tracks. So it is getting a little bit more like downhill, which I'm not in agreement of at all. To me, that goes against the whole ethos and the whole point of it. But and for sure, Eddie uses downhill to be fast at EWS, and he uses EWS to be fast at downhill. He wants to do all his pedaling that he does for EWS training that serves him well in downhill, and all his speed that he gets from downhill racing. So yeah, and Vale will do a couple of EWS races this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Rachel doing an EWS perhaps before we see her doing a World Cup downhill again. There's some riders that you're right, it would be wasting the time. Greg's has podiumed at a EWS, but then those are back in the days when he did, like, it was actually at a downhill venue where he podiumed his EWS. But
maybe it's time and place. Then it's
time and place exercise. And the rider, but
just to do it for the sake of like getting extra out of your athlete, I think we must be aware when to do that.
And at the end of the day, Loic's not going to be wasting his time doing EWS because he could do what you said, Alan, and focus more on downhill during that time. But like, unless you're fighting for the top, 5, I don't think there's any. Or if you're not a top 5 or top 10 rider, that you really need to be focusing on your discipline. And Eddie being the only exception, as you said, then I think, you know what, at the end of the day, people want to love riding the bikes. And if you fall in love with riding your bike again and not just training one course, and, downhillers are doing say 5 runs a day. They're 15 runs max on a downhill weekend, and that's 15 times 3. That's 45 minutes of bike time per weekend. Enduro riders are getting 5 hours of bike time per weekend,
Absolutely.
if not 10, depending on the format. So you get benefits from that, and you maybe,
and against the clock, like as we've been talking about, against the clock, you get probably more against the clock riding in a weekend of EWS than you do for 90% of a downhill season. So I definitely, yeah, absolutely. It's just balance, isn't it? And also different riders needing different things. There's some riders that just want to ride all the time, like the Cade Edwards, the Bernard Kerrs, the Brendan Faircloughs, riding their bike all the time, and their skill level is absolutely through the roof. And the other point that I find fascinating is I don't think any one of those riders I've just named there is lacking in any level of skill on any track you will ever put in front of them. Their limitation to winning a downhill race is not their skill, and I don't think it is for the top probably 25 riders. And I just think that because to me downhill is so interesting because of that. The tracks can be technical in places, but it's very rare that you'll get to a track and think there's only a few people that are going to do this line. It might start off like that. And again, sometimes a few people that are doing that line aren't always the ones that win the race. It doesn't seem to be the absolute limiting factor. It's being able to put that run down when it counts. You've got, you might do 10 runs across the weekend and no one cares about the first 8 runs. The 9th run is your qualifying, and give or take a couple of practice runs on Sunday. The only run that matters is the very last one you do.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about those 3 riders, Cade, Bernard, Brendan. Their love of riding bikes and the amount they're riding bikes, I've probably see maybe as a negative in their downhill racing results. Maybe perhaps they enjoy bikes so much that they maybe lack the focus and maybe the recovery that you need to have just to be a downhill champ. But Cade Edwards surprised me because in the first Portugal race, all his teammates, you could just kind of gather that he was straight away just ridiculously fast and riding and hitting lines, and he still actually ended up with a good result. But I think we might see, everyone's expecting or wondering when he's going to do Rampage, and even like Trek are like, oh, whenever you want to stop racing, just be another free rider. But I think that motivates him more than ever. Everyone's assuming that the other 3 boys are the racers, and he's the jack of all trades or just the Instagram star. But I think it's been a couple of years since he won the Rainbow Stripes as a junior, and I wouldn't be surprised if that internal team rivalry. You might think Cade's not a competitive person on the outside, but when he's so competitive against himself, trying to land a crazy skate park run or trick, or he's like a skateboarder that just really single focuses on one thing. And if he can have that mental approach and dedication to downhill, I think we're going to see him join the other Trek boys on the podium.
And he's in that nice position, isn't he? He's in that mental space in the team. He can look at himself as the underdog rider. Like you were just saying, the other 2 racers are there, and he's kind of come in and he's got that flexibility to say, well, I'm getting the content. But at the same time, I heard his interview that he gave Boris after the Portugal race, and you can tell he wants to win. He really does, and he was very explicit in what he said. But then also what I found really interesting, going back to the earlier point I was making, was he says he's absolutely fine when everything's chilled, but when it gets stressful, he's not so good with the stress. And, my traffic light analogy, your immigration analogy, I think that might play a part. You've got that element of when there's no stress and he's able to try things again and again. I don't think you'll see anyone faster on track, but when it comes down to that one run, it's having such a breadth of riding and riding so much, maybe narrowing that vision isn't quite there for him.
Yeah, and maybe with him talking the way he is, and you've sort of alluded, we'll have some awesome audio sound bites at the end of the podcast. So definitely don't miss that. But Kate Edwards is talking like he's almost a bit sick of being known as the trick guy or the guy that can kind of do everything. Master, like master. What is it? What does it say?
Jack of all trades.
Jack of all
Yeah.
trades.
Well, actually,
master of none, but he's
a
the
master.
master of a lot.
He's
So,
the master of a lot. Yeah.
but maybe he goes, you know what? Before I become the jack of all trades, master of all of those, I do want to tick off some race results. And he's talking with fire. Like he's talking with a bit of a fuck you
absolutely.
attitude, which is great. And I swear on purpose because he's kind of coming across like that. And I think to your analogy, he needs more reps under race conditions where he's actually focusing and he's doing these pre-race races at pace. And he's got 2 great teammates to feed off, 3 great teammates. Holy shit, they got a 4-rider team.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I did want to eventually get over to them because Alan eventually has to maybe get back to actual work. So let's move on to
little Cade story. Lenzerheide, first year junior, me and him were just like, I could see the potential, but there was way more potential. I enjoyed getting crazy like free ride photos during the downhill tracks. I was like kind of guilty of egging him on, and at Lenzerheide that built that new big finish line feature, and he was doing tire taps, and he would have done bar spins if he could have. And then I remember like at World Champs the next year, and was at Lenzerheide, and he was like, "Hey," and of course it counts more if he does in his race run, like. And he's like, "Sven, what do you want me to do?" I'm like, "Bro, you are fucking doing nothing because I want you to be 100% in the game. Don't be thinking about a tire tap or a crazy whatever you was going to do." He maybe would have 3'd the flat drop, but and like I'm quite proud. I claim a lot of victories. I claimed Greg's one at Portugal 2 years ago, but I forbade him to do. I told him I'm not even shooting the finish line feature.
Is that not rare for you, though, Sven? But is that not rare for you? Because normally, I remember going back to another story where you're involved. Dan Atherton had worked his absolute socks off all winter for EWS. He'd done training like no human can do. I was so excited.
And
then Sven Martin, exactly. And then they had a photo shoot with Sven Martin. And Athy comes back with a dislocated shoulder because Sven told him to 360 this jump for absolutely no reason.
No, we got to move on. Thank you for
No, I don't have.
And what about a certain Greg Minard just a few weeks ago? I got a message off Greg, like an audio message, and he was like, "I've been out shooting with effing Sven Martin, and he had to get that shot, and I've gone down on my wrist, and I just literally was like, damn you, Sven." Yeah, the curse.
I'm guilty on the Greg one. I definitely made him. I actually made him do something ridiculous that he didn't.
Admitting this.
That he didn't want to do. He said, "Sven, I don't want to do that line because that doesn't feel natural." I'm like, dude, just do it slow and do it fake and pop it. And that's not how he rides. So I don't know what I was trying to do. Change the road. But Dan Atherton, when he did that 360, I literally didn't even have the camera in my hand. He just did it. And I was like, why would you go do that? Just like, actually, I might have made him do it again so I could.
Yeah, you have, exactly. And
he probably did it fine. Then Sven said, well, you've done it once. We'll do it again.
I definitely didn't say one more time, though. That's for sure.
All right, moving on. As much as we all like the stories, and I do, we eventually got to get to some other riders. And there is Gwyn we'll get to, because I did, on that stats kind of discovery, we'll get to him. But Reece Wilson winning his first World Cup, obviously you spoke about rainbow stripes, so he backed that up, which definitely must have been sort of a tough thing for him. But I'm really impressed with Reece Wilson, and if it wasn't for drop chain, he might have won the last, like 2 of the last races. Yes, same venue.
But and if it wasn't for hitting his head against a tree, he would have won the World Cup after he won World Champs.
World Champs.
Yes, no, of course, but that is confidence, overconfidence, and you've got to go through those.
And
lessons.
If he didn't make the most viral clip of all of internet, which we'll see him do again at Leger, can't wait. He might have won that race too.
Yeah, but he's got to go through these things now. Being a top rider, can win races. He's going to go through the goods, the highs, the lows, the uglies. So he's been through that.
Do you think?
he's one of the few riders with a win last year that has momentum on his side. So I like momentum coming into the season. His preseason races, is that just a tactic to not be as fast as other guys? Maybe he's realizing Leger wasn't the smartest thing to go that hard into that kicker.
No, that was amazing.
No, it was amazing, but thank goodness he was all right. No, I love it. Best clip of downhill I've seen in the last 10 years or whatever it may be. But I mean,
But
no,
he rides the tracks
I
differently as
like
well.
Reese. I like
Yeah.
exactly. He's unique. He has this sort of head on his shoulders, except for Leger, but that's just because he's riding so confidently.
And especially
and
in the tricky, slick conditions. So we can definitely, if everyone has equal and fair conditions at Lourdes, and if it is slippery, not saying he's a wet weather rider because he's proven that he can back it up in the dry.
You're right. That's
but
even more of a point.
For sure.
The wet's going to suit him more than some others,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, in Scotland, you have grit. So the grit gives you a bit of grip. So it's Lourdes is just another, it's just another one.
Yeah, so he could be a really good pick, actually, now that you say, if we think about the wet and we know he's comfortable. Also, we know, Alan, some of these riders like to moan. If it's cold, it's rainy. I was one of those guys, depending on the race, but it's a lot more admin. It's a lot more shit to deal with. Reese lives in a very cold place. He's so used to it. Just putting on multiple sets of kits a day and cold, rainy. He rides in that shit every day. Danny Hart as well. It's not going to phase him.
Formula One.
Yes, I know.
Sven. What's currently going on in Formula One? All these guys have this testing, which is essentially what we've had these last 2 weeks of races that we're watching, that we're basing last year's form and results and this year's sort of preseason form. Don't you think it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors? Like who is going hard as they would in a World Cup? Greg can't go hard if it's not a World Cup. Omri clearly went hard, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he's
showing
surprised
his cards.
To me, the guy that's hiding the cards best, which unless you know how to work the French internets like I do, not many people know that Finn qualified first at this race in Brio because they did qualify and race. And good luck trying to find those results. I did, and I haven't.
Let me just prove Sven wrong because he loves to do it.
Oh, you have the results too.
Yeah. Which ones would you like? The qualifying?
Yeah, I don't. You don't have to show me. That's not it.
That's the qualifying.
Anyway,
don't you think that this
Taruka.
minute? Yeah, but do you not think?
I think Finn might win the opening round. Let's put me.
Okay,
great, because he's the wild card that hasn't won a World Cup.
But look at him at the end of last year, and especially if Loic looks like he's got some, I wouldn't say issues, but clearly Finn doesn't. And then every now and then, he releases some clip, and he did so a couple of days ago, and you cringe when you see him and Omri going that fast on such a narrow trail between trees, sending gaps that it just shows confidence, that speed and confidence. And then he goes ahead and qualifies first, and then like Formula One, he didn't want to show all his cards, and he just didn't want to show he was the fastest car. And he had modified side pods and everything.
So he purposely didn't win the race.
Yeah,
all five of those were on the same second.
But I mean, he's only 0.4 back. So.
Yeah, and having this race be such a short race is a really good primer for the World Cup because there is no mistakes, and you have to, Bernard said he lost 2 seconds at the start. The first pedal, he just spun.
Well, of course he did.
Yeah, but
he'll tell you that
he's actually real happy with his speed and he doesn't care about his result, but he's happy with his speed. So having this really short race after the longer one the weekend before is to me, it's just that people are primed. There's not going to ease into the season. It's going to be full gas at Lourdes right away.
Yeah. And what about someone like Aaron Gwynn, which not sure what happened at that race? If we look at those stats that I brought up, has an incredible track record. He's also won twice in Lourdes. He's got some of the best track record at opening season. I think he's got 3 in the last 6 years. He's got 3 wins at an opening round. Yes, some of them are a few years ago, but I went back the last 7 years. And he's got some wins
and doing it at Lourdes. Yeah,
and doing it at Lourdes. Yes, the form hasn't been there, That is the question
Yeah, but
mark.
that form might have been related to
Alan?
race lingering injuries.
Yes, and team
Or what about,
changes.
yeah,
Like, talk to me about Gwyn. It comes up the last year or two in the preseason of like, is he a victim of his own success? Winning like he did. It's like win or bust for that guy. And the whole
yeah.
industry is like, what's wrong? You got second. What's wrong? You got fifth. It's like, it's really hard to win races. He just did the unthinkable for a long time.
I think I might be wrong here, but I do think he's one of these people that has to be very happy with the bike, and he needs a lot of confidence in that setup. And we know he moved teams, I think, mid-contract to get out of something that wasn't working. And I think with this Intense, maybe it wasn't working great. The last bike, I think that it would be fair to say, didn't set the world on fire. I remember Joe was on an Intense a couple of years ago. His results were okay. He flew to America. The bike got lost in the post. He borrowed a Scott that was 2 sizes too small and pulled out his best result. And he was like, "Whoa!"
I mean,
And now,
done. Finish the podcast
exactly,
right there.
boom.
Scott.
I know. So I think the point I'm trying to make is you need the bike that's going to work. And if you're developing a bike and it's gone in the wrong direction, or there might not be something that's worked that well. And again, with Nico, I think Nico has alluded to that, moving, to his own project. That I think a lot is riding on this new Intense. And
it's interesting that it clearly they wouldn't have made such a drastic change because it wasn't a tweak. The Santa Cruzes tweaked their axle paths and their suspension curves and all the rest, and it was running the same VPP suspension. So it's obviously, to go as drastic a change. And a good point on Nico also making a drastic change both on bike and suspension design. Then maybe this is what Gwyn needed, and Dakota's proved it is a winning bike, and Gwyn was a second off when things were going right. But I think maybe we'll find him in the mid to back half of the season. Although he has been a strong starter, he will settle into that bike and tires and
No, I mean, that's fair play. And I was chatting to Mon Whiteley about it. We both wrote some columns and we were kind of like, this is all well and good, but we're going to know a lot more after round 2 of the World Cup than round 1. And maybe for Gwyn, that'll be the case with the new bike, early season in cold, wet Europe. Every year we come into the podcast, I want Gwyn back on the top step. I know it's super tough for him. Like I said, almost a victim of his own success. A lot of things going on, a lot of demands on sponsors, salaries. And I'm also noticing this, and I haven't spoken to Gwyn himself, but I think him taking ownership of that team is great. I think he's got a lot of business sense as well. And he's doing YouTube to probably give back to sponsors, and something he says he enjoys doing, wants to connect with his fans, maybe form some longevity in the industry. But I'm not seeing every other athlete do that. Is that a distraction? At what point is he a guy that's able to block that out and say, well, I'm sitting on the couch for 3 hours before my next training session, so that's when I do my YouTube? Or is he getting dragged out to do a video here and there to keep the whole package going so that he can say, look, give me another year or two. We've got to develop this bike and I'll get you those wins. So those are just like soft things I'm noticing. Like, I'm a big fan of the sport and Gwyn. Like, I want him back. And I think he can do it, like you said. As soon as he's comfortable enough, he'll attack the way he did back in a few years ago.
Do you not think there's temptation? And again, I might be off here, but if you get a lot of success and you've got this sustained, at the very, very top, surely there's a lot of temptation with different companies going, you know what, we'll throw some money at you. We'll give you a lot of money to run our product. And you just go, well, yeah, why would I not take it? But the problem is if the product arrives and, it's not up to scratch, yeah, you can black out some tires and put your own tires on, or you might want to change a brake setup that's not working, but you're not going to do that on day one. You're going to probably have to go quite a long way down the rabbit hole to go, oh man, this isn't working. And I wonder whether potentially that's happened in the past for Aaron Gwyn, where it just hasn't quite been right. And if everything is set up for him and he's really happy and the product's good and the tires are good, then yeah, we know the guys. I really do think he is committed, and I think he'd be very, very hard to beat on his day. But it's whether he can balance that out. I couldn't imagine that ever doing any filming and editing and stuff is easy. I can't imagine anyone says it will only take an hour, because we all know it doesn't. That, you know, we're not happy with the outcome, so we're not going to put the product out. So it is a hard thing to get right, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a key point. The podcast would have come out, I just forget the timelines, but I had a great conversation with Graves, and he opened up to that very thing, probably being the highest paid enduro rider on Specialized, feeling he just, wanted to get out the house that was Yeti. No wrongdoing on anyone's part, but he wanted to see what it's like out there and try something else for his career. And he mentioned it didn't work out. Certain products were promised, they weren't delivered on time, and there was no exit clause to write anything else. And it definitely suffered, or his results suffered because of that. So I don't fault Gwyn. Like you say, it could be a really cool opportunity with a great company that can develop things, but like we know in life, maybe the timelines are different to what he expected. And maybe that delayed some things. And then, I mean, confidence and momentum is fickle. So great point there, Alan. And maybe this is the time that he's comfortable, he's married. But that's the other thing. Is he comfortable being married, house after,
nobody's comfortable with a big mortgage. You're motivated.
Well, okay, cool. So like that's a crazy thing with Menard. Like he's never comfortable. Like and Gwyn,
Yeah,
I know
and he keeps himself
isn't
busy.
either.
Exactly. Yeah, I think this is it with
we
these
know
guys.
Gwyn isn't, and I'm not alluding to anything. Like I'm just spitstorming it out there. Like it's a chain of events, like you said, that got him to this point. But I think maybe this year is that year if he's comfortable.
Yeah, midway onwards, I'd say, unless
That's
that
fair.
frame arrived at his house in December, which it didn't. So I'm gonna go there. I'll say who is comfortable. Is Lourdes.
I was going
So
to say
I've already called Finn for the win, and I've called probably Omri for the win, and I'm calling Lourdes for the win. So it's going to be a 3-way tie at Lourdes for the win.
Omri, Lourdes,
and
Finn.
Yeah, that's my
so
3
Finn,
picks for the
Finn
win.
is your wild card. So we're doing picks.
Well, I can't choose, dude. I just say all 3 of them are going to win, so I can hedge my bets.
Okay, well then I'll go Omri. Yeah, shucks. I was going to say Loic and then Deprella. Can I have 4?
I mean, I like to mention riders that will be in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's so awesome.
I don't have the balls to call the win.
No, me either. But and then there's so many riders that can do it.
And you can't even do it in the women. You know, you could say it's going to be Pom Pom, but then you see there's and then Valley was right near, but then Cami then goes and beats Valley and quali and race. So like Valley's got second twice in 2 weekends. So will that be a motivator? And will she come back and she's learned what she did wrong or did right? Change some bike setup. And then Tani is back in the mix. She won a World Cup last year, so I wouldn't say she wasn't in the mix, but she wasn't where she wanted to be last year. So it's good. I think, there's actually maybe Pom Pom's a bit easier to call for the win in the ladies than it is to call someone for the men's win. But and that's just those 4 girls that I've mentioned. There's a
But look at these preseason results. So Miriam in first, Valley in second, Seagrave in third, Camille in fourth, Marine in fifth. That honestly could be
that's a World Cup result.
And calling that would be Miriam momentum, speed from last year, like an uncharacteristic crash to lose the World Cup series. But momentum, speed on her side.
And that new and you know what fascinates me most? Commensal have had a winning bike for 3 years. Not one of those 3 years did they stick with the same bike. It's not like the V10. Oh, we got a winning bike in 2017, and it didn't change much, but it did because there were link changes and there were other subtle changes. The mainframes might have stayed the same, but not as much as the Commensal changed over the 3 years, and it's won all 3 years throughout those changes. And the funny thing is, when Greg won World Champs, I asked Arthur. Sorry, I just butchered his name.
Arthur.
But yeah.
who was with Boss Suspension and now
Yes,
works closely
correct,
with Commensal on the downhill development. Yeah.
correct. And I'm like, so Greg won, and then we're having a chat, and I'm like, oh, imagine you could like combine a V10 and a Commensal because they're winning all these races. And he's like, I have a V10 in my garage. What do you think we
Yeah.
do? And then, well, and essentially the common cell is like it's not as high pivot as it used to be. It is kind of got some virtual pivot. I know nothing about suspension design, but there's a bit of virtual pivot placement and mid high, not a high idler, but a mid idler. So they've literally morphed those two bikes together, and you would think and assume that Santa Cruz would be making the similar kind of experiments, So yeah, it's and that's the beauty of the sport. That's why the downhill is the F1, and and what there's so many things that keep us interested. Yeah, they might not sell the most bikes out for the company, but it's these little things, the constant tweaking that keeps us interested. And yeah, it just blows my mind that they change a product so much when it's already winning. But the proof is in the pudding. It just carries on winning, or it stays up at the front of the pack. So you can't rest on your laurels in the sport and in life in general.
Just on Sven's point, I think that's a really interesting point to make, because I think some companies don't want to change the product. They want to keep that sort of 3-year cycle because they want to win and then go, well, we need people to buy the bikes now. We need to we need to get some bike sales off this. But like you're saying, with it being the Formula One, I think that downhill bike sales as a percentage of the overall bikes sold by each company, say Commensal, it must be a very small percentage. And surely you're better off almost keeping them as prototypes. But to me, I do wonder whether some companies, say we've got this bike, we're going to stick with it because we want the privateers to be actually buying it off the shelf.
Can you imagine being a Commensal customer and every time you think you've bought the latest bike,
Exactly.
the next fucking race, they are,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I got last year's bike again,
That's
Dude, I do
exactly
that
it.
in golf. I'm always trying to buy the best driver to fix
Yeah.
my swing, and then 6 months later, TaylorMade brings another driver out. But Tiger Woods hits it, so I obviously need
And you
it,
can
right?
adjust the bolts on them now, can't you? You can
Yeah,
take out bits and put bits in it, as
yeah,
if that's going to make you hit
exactly.
it straight.
Exactly.
Dude.
But on that point, I was going to say, having these guys in your corner developing, say, you know what, it was good, but now we've tweaked it a little bit, but we believe this is going to make it even better. I think that can also help with the rider's confidence as well, which is another factor to consider because, as you know, Alan, I mean, any little sort of gain that you can make can just give that rider that extra edge. It's okay, well, they say it's better. I'll trust them and
I'll go
hopefully
with
we'll
that.
be better on track. But I mean, Valley
Yeah.
Hall, I think, will be right there for the win. But I think I did my research.
The pressure's off her. She's made all the mistakes.
Yeah, she's made all the mistakes. She won the
Yeah.
series. She is so in the top 5, she's the only rider to not have won an opening round. However, she's barely been in the lead field. So it's like not a fair representation. All the other ladies. And same as Cami. She's so new, but she's already won a round.
I'm going to say the girls better watch out for Cami. She is a newcomer, but she's probably the person that probably sets the most goals and makes the most progress in her riding from year to year. You would never 3 years ago have put her for a race winner, never mind a world champs, and never mind a World Cup to back it right up. And then she's also used to be the worst at jumping, let's say, out of the World Cup field. And now, if you look at those technical jump lines that they had at the race in Briot, those are some like kind of supercross on off and rhythm sections where you had to land and compress and pump and not pedal. And I could see by just some of social media that some of the girls were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And like hers was the first clip in practice that she was greasing those things. And I think she manages to learn and make progression with her riding. And then she has all the balance abilities and there's other like sports crossover stuff. She might not be the most natural racer. And like when you see what Pom Pom and Valley and Tani and Rachel Atherton used to do with the bike, and but just from sheer perseverance, and I think they're going to have a tough time on their hands.
I think with the girls, the point you're making about confidence, what I saw, and linking also to Camille, if you go to Leogang, you go back to Leogang, and I know you were standing at this section for a good chunk of practice, Sven, is on the lead into that quite dodgy big double that sends you out of the woods onto that sort of final section. And it was where Valleys crashed and really hurt herself. And a lot of the girls were really struggling with that. But what I saw was that was really impacting on the way they practiced the rest of the track. They almost couldn't get that section out of their head. And talking to a few of the girls, they were talking about was, I haven't done the jump yet. I haven't done the jump yet. And it really affected them. And when they did finally tick it off the list, which is an impressive feat in itself, that's a huge, difficult jump with a difficult run in. It almost was they were looking back on their practice and going, you know what, I didn't make the most of practice because I was that worried about that damn jump that the other 95% of the track I didn't even take in. And I do think a number of the girls really ride on that confidence and either really boosted by it or it really knocks them down. And the gym I was in last week, I trained some of the crew out of a gym in Oswestry, and Tane was in there, and she'd just come back from Portugal, and we were having a chat, and she said that she actually really liked the fact that she went to that race and Miriam and Valley were there because she had to turn it on. And I think Tane suffered from some sort of injury hangovers and some quite long-term, should we say, knock-ons or ailments that maybe have knocked her confidence a bit and maybe limited her just riding naturally and not thinking about anything, because her style on the bike is very free-flowing. But when a rider tightens up, that flow just disappears. And now Valley has got through those crashes that I think were down to really the pressure on her to get that win. I do wonder if Valley's going to just push on and on and on and leave the other girls behind, or whether the experience of Miriam, who again does seem to get better year on year. I've always been impressed with how Miriam has got better and her style seems to have changed over the years. I think that the race with those four girls and Marine as well in there, I think you've got an interesting top five that are going to be shuffling around a lot.
Yeah, that clip of Miriam that in that Portugal race 2 weekends ago, where you kind of you either dropped off the rock or you went around the rock and then you pushed to the right into that left slingshot berm. Like these days, as sad as it is, your feeds kind of scroll themselves if you're watching stories. And I just, saw it. I wasn't studying it, so I didn't actually see that it was a clip of her. And I just like stopped dead and thought that looked super gnarly. And I repeated the story or the reel or whatever was auto playing, thinking it was like one of the Common Cell boys.
Yeah.
And it was Pom Pom. And I was like, and I don't want to say she rode like a guy but in this day and age, you've got to be careful what you say. But I could not believe how strong and like she is ready physically. And like, as you just said, Alan, which was what you reminded me of, she's gone from strength to strength each year, as they all are and have to. It's no different to all the men that are stepping it up every year. But she's going to be hard to beat because she is looking strong and of course confident, even despite her mishap last year.
Yeah, I mean, the momentum's on her side with the pre-race. Bloody well winning the series last year if it wasn't for that really, I think, just unlucky crash. I don't know if that was just pressure and choking. I think she was pushing pretty hard. But the question mark is obviously Marine Cabarrou. She's shown that she can win races, but she's coming off injury last year that she had to fight back from, and then quite a gnarly neck one as well. So she's showing more pace now. She is feeling good on the bike and stuff like that, but that might be a little bit delayed season for her, maybe for the win. And as well as Tane, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, Alan. So you spoke to her, and you can often gauge quite a lot from speaking to someone, or maybe on what they didn't say. Like, is she sounding more quietly confident about her body and how she was at that race, or do you think she's still building that confidence and maybe later in the year will where we see the normal Tane?
My feeling when we were chatting was that she was probably quite pleasantly surprised with her result there, and she was like, you know what, we're into this fight. That's good. I think she's maybe not done everything she would have otherwise done this winter, based on sort of getting herself comfortable physically. But I think that Tyne is one of these riders where she lives and rides. That will really set her up for Lourdes well. It's steep, it's muddy, it's rooty, and there's rocks about. There's she'll. What I find really interesting is when Rachel was racing, you had Rachel and almost Tane was the young pretender who was in theory going to be crowned as soon as either going to beat Rachel or when Rachel retires, was going to take over. And it was almost when Rachel stopped racing, all the other girls found that, you know what, I can win this now, but I'm going to have to put everything into trying to win. And they all seem to elevate their game and really push each other on. And I do think that the field has improved and improved and improved. And maybe Tane can get back to that position where she was running number 2 to Rachel for a while, and in theory she should be number 1 now. But it's certainly not been that easy, has it?
I think the Tane Rachel rivalry is what propelled and got Tane, like you said, got her up to where she was, like number 2, but not just number 2. Also, not just stealing wins from Rachel, but beating Rachel on an equal race. And I think when Rachel didn't or prematurely ended her season with the injury and not having Rachel last year, Tani didn't have someone to like beat. She was friendly with Pom Pom and friendly with the other girls. I think she needed that. If Rachel was racing last year, I think Tani would have done better. Yes, she did have some injuries and niggling ones and neck issues and all the rest. But I think now she's perhaps recognized that herself. Well, she has. She's told me that like Rachel not being there has not fueled her fire as much as it used to be. So, recognizing all these things, with the head is as Andrew, you used a sports psychologist in your racing. It's that's the other part of the package.
No, I mean, it's a huge part. I mean, it's the biggest part. At the end of the day, you've spoken about Cami, who's up to her skill level, as well as she's newer to the sport. So things are still exciting. So seeing those gains that she makes, oh, I'm jumping better. Like that's motivating. For someone like Miriam or even Tane now, like seeing improvement it's so small. It's all those small gains. So, the gains you do with your trainer and all those sort of stuff. So I think as years go on, it's tougher and tougher to stay motivated. But you alluded to the mental side, and that's everything really at the top level of any sport. And that's sticking to your process and realizing when you're injured, unfortunately, there are stepping stones to get back. You might not be able to have a goal of winning a race if your last race is 5th place. So we're just getting word that Alan, that's why I've lost my train of thought. Alan has a deadline and we're having so much fun. But
for Andrew and I, this is off season. For Alan, this is like the most crucial time of his year. And here we are nattering about and Alan's like, this is like costing me literally like $100 every minute to talk to you guys.
No, it's. I think this is exactly it. It's getting that racer in a position where they know what they need to focus on. They can turn up to the line physically ready. Their bike's up for it, but also mentally they're able to focus. And the irony is that you spend your entire off season and your entire life focusing on a race run. And then when you get to that race run, you've somehow got to tell yourself this isn't what you've been focusing your entire year on. Because if you built that pressure and expectation on your shoulders, you just would massively underperform. And it's a cruel irony of sports performance at an elite level.
Yeah. So who is your picks then, Alan? We haven't nailed you down.
I think
is there conflict of interest?
Well, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you a brief little story that will justify my expectation, okay, and my prediction. So I was on track. Me and Greg were walking the track at Maribor, And he came to me and he said, "We need to go up the track. I need to find out where Lourdes has got 2.5 seconds over me in the final minute." And honestly, those corners, as you'll know, Sven, once you come, you've got that dodgy like triple, that natural triple, that horrible left-hander. And then from that section down, it's not difficult. It's, you can ride it on a trail bike, but somehow Loris was able to push and push and push and gain time on the very best in the world and significant margins. And to me, Loris is going to be very dangerous because if he can do that on non-technical sections, we know what he can do when it is technical. So I think that we're going to have some French in that top 5. I'd love to see Greg on the podium. I'd love to see one of the British lads I coach, Joe or Charlie, get cement themselves in that top 10. And I can't wait for it to all start. But I think the French are probably going to have a strong showing at their home round.
Over to you, Sven.
I think I've already made all my calls over the course of this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, then I'll have to be put on the spot. Yeah, I mean, I've written this article trying to say that to pick downhill, we could use some ways of picking the stock market or predicting it, but that's a terrible idea. And I think downhill's worse. I think it's way, way worse. So going off momentum, going off past performances, I do like Loris. I think that's almost a safe bet if there ever is one. And then you've got Amri riding at crazy pace. So I like those two. But those two, Loic's at home stewing. So I think he's going to elevate his game there. Thibaut de Preller, I think, is going to take longer than I said earlier, maybe to fight back and come and win that race. So those are kind of my picks. I do think it'll be French, and in the ladies as well. Miriam probably over Valley. Cami could be. Marine, I think, still fighting back from injury. So
Yeah.
Miriam probably in the ladies. But like I say, hopefully it's a crapshoot of weather. Maybe not hopefully. But that's just for my picks. That no one can say.
I just hope it's stable.
Let's hope for some good weather, right?
Yeah,
Stable.
I think that like Leger's that sort of classic situation where the clouds roll in at 4:30. It really can make things more difficult, and we know that they changed the whole qualifying method purely because of that. So you couldn't sandbag and come down early when potentially the weather's better. So let's have a fair fight, and I look forward to catching up with you guys in the pits.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for joining us, and definitely we'll catch up in the pits, and we'll have you on for the other episodes coming over. We will kind of review some of the races. Sven, any final thoughts? Or definitely missed a lot of riders, an incredible crop of riders that could upset any of our predictions.
Yeah, we'll let Alan go, but I even though we've overlooked them, but I've got to mention 3 juniors that have piqued my interest. But Alan, it's below his pay grade. He can leave us.
All right, thanks again to Alan coming on board. It's awesome to get his insight. I mean, I've worked with him, but he has a real holistic way of training athletes. And when I was staying with Brendan, he knew that me and Brendan would go ride at Surrey Hills. So he would say, cool, Saturday, you're riding at Surrey Hills, do this. And I know he knows how Greg's schedule works. And it's great to get those insights.
Yeah, I thought you think speaking to a trainer and a coach, and especially from the strength and the physical side of things, but like you said, he takes a holistic viewpoint, and I think him recognizing the rider's mental needs and how that coincides and works. He works the two together, which makes him a successful coach. You can't just be like anything these days. You can't just be good at one thing. You can't just focus on he's not telling us how many, and for different riders is like not how many reps and how many pull-ups and how many squats or how much weight. He's like literally takes a completely different approach to all of his riders, and it definitely gives perspectives that none of us would think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's that old saying, a happy rider is a fast rider, and every rider must find their own sort of happiness, flow state, all those things. Same as Gwyn. He needs to get to a point that he's happy, he's confident to go fast, and the same as any other rider coming back from injury or anything. And some exciting riders on the horizon for you, or at least some juniors going on to factory teams like Jackson Goldstone going over to Syndicate, which I think will actually do Greg some positives, having those
I think
young
so.
guys around. You hung out with them at a sort of photo shoot and training camp. What was that sort of like?
Well, there's the juniors. You always have these crop of juniors, and they come in waves. And last year, the two guys that were battling most for the wins and the overall was Jordan on Madison and Jackson, and then Jackson edged him out at the end. But it was close. And when Jordan did win or did have a good one, he beat Jackson quite solidly at some rounds, which probably also made Jackson realize at an early age that he's like Vale. She was beaten as a junior when everyone thought she's unbeatable. She got beaten as a junior, which I think you need to happen as a junior. Both of those guys now second year, but you've got another third year coming to spoil those guys' party, and it's yet another Frenchie, and I think he's on a common cell as well again. Yeah, he is because he's. So we got Hugo joining the fold, and I know there was quite a bit of. He had a couple of people interested in him and looking at him, and it's going to be and because he's French and comes from that background, he won't have that rookie first year junior like a lot of the first year juniors do. You get some that are already pro. So I think Jordan, Jack, and Hugo are going to be battling it out all season long. Even though, yeah, Jackson's on a new bike and loves it, and in the rainbow jersey, he's super confident. But it's not going to be easy work for him.
No, and it's so interesting that this junior category, how it evolves. Back in the day, we were speaking about Troy Brosnan, Sam Hill, those guys, G-athletes, and they came up and there was no junior category. So it was sink or swim for those guys. At least you have some time. You're riding against other juniors and you're on a podium that builds that sort of confidence. So it is awesome to see them getting picked up, but it is changing the sport. So
Yeah.
I'm in two minds because these other guys that don't get on factory teams early as a junior sometimes get left a little bit behind, which is just the nature of the beast these days.
Well, I mean, the sport's becoming more professional, and credit to UCI. The best thing they could have done is recognize the juniors and giving them their own category. And it's a lot of juniors wouldn't have got the support if there wasn't the junior category. So, and a lot of teams are loyal to the junior. They don't just kick them out. They give them a solid chance as their first year elite, even and then maybe they keep them or drop them. But the fact that there's now a category of their own, so they can be recognized their own, and of course they're comparing their results and where they would be placing in elites, but it's too bad we don't get to see it on the live feed, because it is, maybe we will in 2023, but the fact that they can have their own category has upped the level of the sport. They treat it like factory riders, they're groomed like factory riders. They're often at the events. Back in the day, they used to pre-run. They're not allowed to do anymore because they realized that was unfair. A lot of the top juniors were pre-runners the year before. Little sneaky.
Finn
Yeah.
was one of them.
And so was.
Who else?
There's been a couple.
Probably Loic and Lourdes.
No, I don't think
they
there was
not-
a category.
Were they not pre-runners at
I
all?
can't remember them as pre-runners. I definitely
I remember Finn did almost a whole World Cup year as a pre-runner.
Yeah, I mean that was.
Just think about that.
Yeah, that was invaluable.
I'd raced
invaluable.
one World Cup before going to elite category as a junior. Some Aussies did 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Some Frenchies could do 5 or 6. So, it has elevated the sport, and they're coming in ready, and riding really quick because they still get to compare their times. Yes, they go a little bit early in the morning, but we can still dissect and see if they got sort of fast enough times to call themselves a podium elite rider like Troy has done, like Brendan has done, things like that. So, but before we sort of wind this down, let's not forget.
Forget people we forgot. Like now,
No,
I'm just
I
thinking.
got the notes. Danny Hart hasn't been mentioned, but I want to put him
Laurie,
in.
we mentioned briefly, but not in as a contender. And I think.
And those two are almost like World Cup winners. That can they come back to
I think
where they want to be?
I think both of those could quietly come back, especially. Actually, I'm not going to say especially any of them. either of those guys could surprise us for the win. I'm going to say, because of the unpredictability on the new bike, I'm saying it might be, for me, I could see maybe Laurie getting a win before Danny. And then the same applies for that new team, that young, the good vibe going around the syndicate right now. We spoke of who's going to be on the podium or who's going to win, and we kept talking about 4 of the girls, but Nina has won a World Cup, then did suffer some injuries and concussions, and so we haven't talked about her. So it's we can't talk about everyone. We already gone 2 hours almost, and this is meant to be a quick
Sven
pre-season
is
podcast.
needing to look at what the surf swell's doing tomorrow. I'm sure I've got some things to do, a few beers to drink. No, but we can't speak about everyone because we would go 5 hours and you guys wouldn't want to listen to us. But yeah, it'll be great to see Nina on a factory ride, come back from those injuries. What will that be like for her? Like I mentioned earlier, the expectation, is it just going to be a positive? Or if the results don't come, does the pressure of being on a factory team and getting everything done for you? So there's no excuse. You can't say, "Oh, I'm working on my own bike."
She had a let's say she had a factory level
Yeah,
setup
but
last year.
this ups a level.
Yeah.
Let me tell you that when you get on that
She
factory
felt-
ride and a few results don't go your way, it's really tough. It can be tough.
Yeah.
But I think this is only going to be a positive move for her in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, at the test camp, she felt the pressure early on, to be in that same realm as everyone. But by the end of it, and she's had a break from her injuries, but by the end of it, by all reports, she was confident and performing well and knocking her times down on the testing, and that's really what counts, or seeing the progress go in a certain direction.
Yeah, and definitely not last but least, but someone like Charlie Harrison finding that speed and form again after some injuries. And then Angel Suarez, I think, has really been knocking on the door.
Yeah.
I saw that at the last round.
Did he
big
get
time.
injured at the end of? He's been quiet this off season, but
I haven't
he's
looked
been
into
instrumental.
why he's been quiet, but I do think between Angel, Dakota, Charlie, not to put them in the same boat, we have mentioned them. These would be guys that could be knocking on podium and get momentum big time in this year. And then, exciting, he might not knock on the podium door, but Nico Malali building his own bike or getting someone to build their own bike for him. It's obviously a story that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, he's like a blue collar.
It's just like a different story for the World Cup.
Well, and he's a blue collar. He's a blue collar rider, racer, and gets shit done and gets in a digger, builds. He's like what every sport needs. Of course, he wants to do as well as he can do, but it's almost like he's cared more about giving back to mountain biking. So what a solid bloke.
Yeah, it is that. It's like, okay, we don't have a race series out east. I'll make a race series. Okay, we don't have good enough tracks. I'll build them.
Yeah.
Hey, I kind of got this idea about a bike, and I'm going to just build a bike.
Yeah.
And put a race season together. But guys, this has been epic. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Send some feedback. What do you want to hear more about? What do you want to hear less of? If it's me and Sven arguing less, it's not going to happen. That's what we're here to do, is kind of challenge each other. But this has been the Crankbrothers Race Review with me. I'm Andrew Neethling. As I said, synonymous with downhill racing. Sven correcting me if we're going to include the flat pedal, 12 years of elite world champs, but 11 years in a row with that mallet DH pedal. They've got the shoes going. Sven was telling me before the podcast started, he's like, oh my goodness, I think I've got a few pairs in the box, but I didn't need to build them up because they last so good. They're super comfy. And thanks to Sven, I don't think people know, not all of you do, but him and Anka housed me a stone's throw away from the Crankbrothers office in Laguna Beach. So that's where this history comes of this
at the
podcast.
Bottom of the most iconic trail in California, Telonix, Laguna Beach.
Yeah. Do you remember my first run down Telonix and my first year over after Ciota?
Didn't you almost like dislocate your shoulder or something?
I honestly.
Oh wait, this is
almost.
I suggested
my pro
he followed.
Career almost stopped. I stopped before it started.
I suggested he follows me because I'm local, and even though he's a faster rider than me, I know I was definitely on his first run would have been a hell of a lot faster than him. I beat Lopes down the track, so I figured you should follow me and not the other way around. No, I know what I'm doing. I'm like, all right, let's see. I think
I
I
went-
found him in a pile
I
halfway
literally
down the
went
track.
cartwheeling down one of the steepest slopes I've done in my entire career. So yeah, just don't let the ego get too ahead of you. But it was you that actually forced me to try Crankbrothers pedals the year later, and I have never looked back. You remember that?
Yeah, I think
You're like, you're going to ride these pedals. I was like, well, what I ride works. And you're like, no,
and
there's something different about these pedals.
and
You need to
that's
try them.
change. We're creatures of habit, and I don't like change. I like and
Same
then
here.
to go off like a Shimano style SPD, which was 99% of what people, if they rode clipped in or rode clipless pedals, that's what you were used to. So whether it's changing your training like Menard did, or changing pedals, or changing, change can have good results in the end.
No, absolutely, guys.
You know what's Murphy's Law? Someone's going to be on the podium for sure that
We haven't mentioned.
that we
Yeah, but
haven't
of
mentioned.
course. That's why I say I'm like, secretly, if it rains, then none of these predictions matter. But guys, don't run away, because if I do remember to do this, you're going to hear from some riders. Thanks to Boris, he got some audio for us, as well as I think I'm going to throw a sneaky Troy Brosnan insert where he helps predict who he thinks will win. So, guys, this has been the Crankbrothers Race Review. I'm Andrew Neethling. That was Sven Martin. Alan Milway was with us before that. You know what to do. Like, subscribe. Oh, no, it's a podcast. You do subscribe and leave me a review, because I bloody well do this in my spare time. You might as well help me get up the ratings.
Leave me a review too, because I'm doing this in my spare time too.
So send Sven a direct message with some constructive feedback, just like he does it. So,
just
guys,
make it raw, blatant,
yeah,
cutting feedback.
yeah, go for it. Swear at him. Do whatever you need. Sven loves it. He is such a fan of the sport, as am I. So thanks, guys. Enough blabbering from us. Till the next one, stay well.
Moving the needle? Lourdes. Some good days testing in Lourdes? Yeah, long days actually, like long week. Yeah. We stayed there like a couple days, and then Taruka was actually closed, so we couldn't go like change track, so it's been long. And after all this testing and your off-season training, how prepared do you feel for the season, and what is your prediction for the first race? I don't know about the others. I don't feel there yet. Okay. So we have 2 more races before Lourdes to feel comfortable and get things dialed. That's just it. Like, racing is tough, and there's nothing else that matters than racing. So as long as you're not racing, you don't really know where you're at. And right now I don't feel super comfortable. So we'll see next week, and then the week after, and then after it's Lourdes. So hope to be ready by Lourdes. But if you going the first race on the weekend in Portugal, and if you would like win the race with like this competitive field, and you would win it, let's say by 4 seconds, would it change your mind? Just like, okay, you think like, okay, now I am actually ready. I just didn't felt ready. You know what I mean? Yeah, obviously, like when you compare yourself by timing, like on the same track, same day with all the others, like you can have actually a base, and probably in the next few races we're gonna see where we stand. I'm not expecting anything, because it's probably gonna be some tight racing. It's everyone's so fast these days, so it's just a little motivational thing and confidence, and get the body and the. I'm on interview bar, and we'll see everything dialed, and we hope to be, and Lourdes soon. Matt, good to see you here in Portugal. Just arrived.
Yeah, it's good to be out. It's nice to have a little bit of bike time before the season starts. I think I've been out a couple of times already this year, but it's nice to get the team together. First time for the whole team to get together and do a bit of down ride together, and a little bit of boxes left to tick. But
and also
of
all,
all,
the race?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we ride like 3 days this week, and then the race this weekend. So that's the first time really we go to test everything and make sure we're on the right path, ready for the World Cup. But feeling really good, and I've had a really good winter, so perfect. Looking forward to it.
Did you expect the amount of pro riders and teams here in Lourdes, and then also at the race, or probably more?
To be fair, when when we first chatted about it, I didn't really think about it too much. I expected it to probably just be us and maybe a couple of maybe local guys. But now there's everyone here. It's pretty good actually. It's like quite a chilled atmosphere. It's nice to see some faces in this environment and not have too much stress from like big races and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty nice and just enjoying the track. It's rough as hell, so quite good for testing. So hopefully we learn some things this week and yeah, just enjoy riding.
So would you say you are race ready for Lourdes?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny actually because usually at this time of the year I don't really feel ready. I've obviously had a bit of bike time by this point usually, but not really ready to race yet. But I think for a good few weeks now I felt like I'm ready to go racing. I want to kind of see where I'm at.
Okay.
So I think that's positive and yeah, just ready to get going now. Looking forward to it.
And kind of what's your goal? Like, I mean, obviously, it's
yeah. I mean, still to win, and like hopefully this year get a World Cup win, and if not, be on the podium and show that I can consistently be at the top. I mean, I've done it before, and I feel like I'm ready to do it again.
I'm here with Reese and Charlie.
Nice.
Is it little test camp World Cup here with all the teams for you guys?
I mean, yeah, it almost feels like a practice day to an extent. I don't think there's many missing, really. I mean, there's obviously a few teams missing, but yeah, it's ridiculously busy. We need whistles on the track.
But is it feeling good because you were here a bit earlier before the track was so blown up?
Yeah, we definitely missed the frenzy. Somebody's lobbed a chunk of meat into the water, and the piranhas have arrived this week. It's pretty hectic up there now, but we got here pre that, so we got a good 4 days of quite quiet, almost silent track, just us.
The track was still destroyed, to be honest, but yeah, it was pretty quiet, and now everyone's showing up. It was crazy. I was having the same conversation though. It's so weird how it doesn't really matter where the first race is to start the season. Somehow everyone kind of always ends up at the same spot testing. It was like Schladming the last 2 years. Every single team in the paddock was there, and it's the same here. Every day there's one or two more teams that are showing up, so it's pretty crazy. But it is cool. It's cool to get that many fast people on the track and just see everyone. And like Reese was saying, it pretty similar feeling that we're at a World Cup and it's just one of the practice days.
That's perfect. But coming out of the off-season, you guys haven't seen each other for quite a while. How was it for you, Charlie, to see Reese on track, and for Reese, how was it for you to see him back on track?
It's always good to see everybody riding again. Especially, I mean, I keep hyping. I feel like I'm Cade's hype man these days, but honestly, I'd pay good money to just watch Cade ride a bike all day. He does some of the most ridiculous stuff. And it's the same with the first day we were doing some trains. No, we got a wet day. It rained one of the days, so it dampened the dust down, so we managed to all follow each other, and we done a party lap at the end of the day, and everybody's just pulling handbrakes into the pits, just shouting and loving it. Yeah, you miss everybody for sure. It's a long off season.
Yeah, it's funny every year, the season goes by so quickly, and at the end of the season, everyone's, pretty tired. Oh, I'm looking forward to the off season. You go home for a bit, have some time off, and then you're start getting antsy, and you're like, oh, when's everyone getting back together? So yeah, it seems like for the last month and a half, Reese and I have just been messaging each other, just being like, man, can't wait to get back everything. And it's so good to hang out and ride together. Unfortunately, it was, good for testing, but unfortunately we weren't really able to do any actual riding together this week, because you would just axe yourself immediately, just basically just tape your goggles up because you cannot see anything anyways.
You
but
got pretty close to me once. You definitely wanted to ride with me once. Charlie actually rode over the top of me yesterday. Rear-ended me. Insurance claim job. It was huge.
It was a bit of a fender bender. Reese's brake lights were out, and I ran it in pretty hard. But yeah, it's good. It's awesome to be back together and just hanging out.
Sounds fun.
It's cool, just as a group, everyone. We've had so much to do these last 6 days, and everyone's just really motivated to try and get the most out of everything. So everyone's been going hard, just freaking pounding runs, trying this and that, and tinkering beyond belief. So it's been good.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So that's going on for you here in Lourdes at your test camp.
In Lourdes?
In Lourdes.
We're not doing much right now.
How are you feeling? How is the riding going?
Yeah, riding's good. It's pretty blown up. The track's like just fucked. There's a lot of riders here, but it's good. It's good for practice, good for training.
Is it already some kind of competition with you have Marine here, you have Valley here, I'm not sure who of the Ezet and the Kemi is here.
Yeah, everyone's here.
Would you prefer to have like a start of the season test training camp more on your own, or to have competitors, let's say, around?
Yeah, I guess I don't know. It's kind of cool that the other girls are here as well, because you're on the side of the track and you kind of get to see a little bit, but I don't know if that just fuels the panic a bit more. I don't know. I'm not riding the same track as them today. I picked a different track.
Okay.
Just to chill, because I got all my work done yesterday and the day before, so I'm just finishing off the couple of days hard work with a bit of fun.
Have you seen something what impressed you riding wise?
No, I haven't really I've just watched a couple of bits from the side, but I mean they're looking good. The girls are looking good.
Oh, the girls, I thought in general.
No, just the girls are looking strong. I don't really care if anyone else comes by.
Okay. So, ready for Lourdes? Kick some ass?
It'll be good to get a race in. That's why we're all here for Portugal at the weekend. But I feel pretty ready already. So
ready?
Yeah, ready already.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
How are you doing, Marine?
I'm fine. I'm really happy to be back on my bike and enjoy hanging out with my teammates. I did an MRI in late October that revealed a broken kneecap that was related to my injury in Leisure World Cup and explained the pain over the end of the season. I had to stop training and set up a recovery plan. But unfortunately, I hurt my back at training in early December and a broken vertebra delay again my winter program. I am now fully recovered and working hard to be back in shape, and I'm feeling super good at the moment.
What could we expect from Lourdes?
I'm super excited by Lourdes World Cup. It's on home soil and one of my favorite tracks. I did well last time we raced there for my first elite race. I will do my best to get a good result and hope a lot of people will come to watch and enjoy that very first 2022 World Cup in France.
Chaos said you are absolutely on fire. Reese said it's absolutely entertaining to see you riding here. How do you feel about the ride you're riding?
Yeah, I'm happy with it. Feeling good. Feel I don't know. I just feel like I'm riding okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Not okay, but I don't want to toot my own horn. But I feel I don't feel shit. So we must be doing something good. Yeah, I'm having fun. Always having fun, dude. Well, and not when I'm stressed, but yeah. No, I'm having fun. It's good. It's really good.
Are you ready for the stress in Lourdes?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure I'm ready for the stress in Lourdes. Hopefully there will be no stress and it'll all go smoothly, but I don't think that will be the case.
Are you trying to, we had it before, the fun part of your riding, if it's a skate park, the dirt jumps, or just home trail shredding, to adapt this to your racing, to be more chilled and to enjoy it more and to not think too much and just
Yeah, definitely. I would like to do that, but when the racing comes, you're always going to get stressed. You're always going to want to do well. You're not going to be chilled out and sit back at the end of the day because you don't want. Yeah, you want to win.
Yeah.
We don't come here to come 10th or 20th. We come here to fucking win.
Ooh, yes. Okay.
Well, I think you're in it for the wrong reason if you don't want to win.
That's a good one.
I said that. I even said that in the other day. I was like, I'd be happy to get top 10, and then the other day I was like, actually, no, fuck that.
Yeah.
Why the fuck would I want a top 10? I want to win. And all these people are going to listen to this and be like, oh, this little fucker can't win, but
no,
I'm going to try.
Yeah? No, it's a good point.
Yeah.
So, is this also the goal for the... I know you stay for the race on the weekend, right?
Yeah. See, Taruka, every national race you're always going to get smoked by some local hero, so I don't have any goals for that, but World Cup for sure, my goals are set.
Quite a big field here now.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, but there's always going to be one of those local heroes going to come through and ruin your day, so I have no expectation for Taruka. It's just a practice race for me. I won't be striving for
Well, always striving for the top, but you know what I mean. I won't be angry for
But
it.
we'll see you at the podium in Lourdes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Well,
Let's
no,
leave it by
we try.
No, you said it
We
before.
try. No, we try.
Okay.
I said I'm trying.
Okay.
Okay.
I see you at the podium in Lourdes.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And because you're not going to be there, maybe speak a bit more free. Like, who do you have your money on? If you were forced to put some money on coming into the first race in Lourdes.
I would say, like, if I was forced to put my hand on one person to win the first World Cup, I would honestly, it's a toss up, and it's maybe not who you think it might be. But I honestly think I want to give you one, but I'm going to give you two. And they're obviously both French because obviously there's a lot of Frenchies.
You can give as many as you want.
Yeah, so I really think Thibaut has got a bone to pick with last year, and I think he's going to come out swinging. And another guy that obviously didn't race much last year in Amaury, we just saw he won the race in Portugal, I think it was last weekend, and he's obviously on form and can ride fast. So he's at a level where he's ready to win again. I think those two are a pretty safe bet that they will be one of the ones that win the first World Cup. The reason why I didn't say Lourdes or Loic, personally, I think Lourdes is a very, I guess, gnarly track in terms of it's pretty slick. It might be pretty icy. They're pretty smart races in terms of the season and the overall. I don't think those two will be ready to push it enough to get the win at the first World Cup. And that's just kind of my personal thing. I might eat my words here. We'll see pretty soon. But yeah, I honestly think, like, now that I'm sitting on the couch, I'm going to be watching it from home. I've kind of got an unbiased look at it. I'm actually really excited to see how the race goes and how it plans out. You know, as much as I'd love to be there racing, I'm actually really, really excited to watch it and see where people qualify and where they come. And hopefully by sitting back and watching it live and stuff, I can actually learn something. I don't know. We'll see.